Hey everyone, welcome to our big State of Gaming Infinite Summer panel. I'm really excited for this one. I've been looking forward to it for a while. In this big discussion panel, we're going to be focusing on all of the June announcements and the gaming industry in general. We're going to be going over some of the things that were announced this month and kind of wrap up Infinite Summer as it comes to a close here near the end of the month. And I really am excited because I got two awesome panelists for you here today, guys. We have James, who is one of the lead creators on Project Genesis. You may recognize him from our Project Genesis developer interview. He's a really cool industry knowledge creator. He's worked AAA, he's worked indie. He builds games. Like I talk about games, but he actually builds games. So I'm really excited to have James. And also I have my longtime friend, Blake. I've known him for years. He's an avid gamer. He loves video games as much as I do. He's really passionate about it. So I'm excited to have these two panelists to talk about it with you guys. And I would like for you guys to introduce yourself.
I'll jump in. Hey, everybody, I'm James Mayo. I'm the founder, as Jesse said, of 8 Circus Studios, working on the project Genesis. Basically, it's a sci-fi PvP shooter. And so it was great talking with you before, Jesse. Blake, I'll hand it over to you. It's very nice to meet you.
Hey guys, my name is Blake. I've been friends with Jesse, gosh, for a long time now. I used to work with him. I've been playing games for, gosh, about 10 years now. And I'm just your typical everyday gamer, and I just enjoy the community, and this is like my escape.
Cool.
Awesome. It's really glad to have you guys. I'm excited to do this one because this time is one that I'm really passionate about. We've done, for those of you watching, you may have seen, we've done a couple discussion panels already for Infinite Summer. We did one on Tomb Raider and Apex to correspond with our GI channels. We've done several developer interviews. We have several trailers. And this one, and you may have seen, we've been doing regular recap articles talking about the various June announcements. So every June, big June announcement, big event from Summer Game Fest, the Xbox event, we've been doing recap articles. And this is just going to be an entire discussion about the general state of gaming. So we're going to talk about like why we like gaming, what are some of the things that we liked. We're just going to go through the gaming industry and talking about it. We're going to dive into our first question. So the first question, we're going to start a little high level. And it's just going to be, what does gaming mean for you? What makes video games such a special medium? I wanted to start with that question because we're obviously a gaming platform. We love video games. We have a video game creator here. Why do we devote so much of our life to video games? Why is it special? What does it mean to you guys?
Yeah, Blake, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I can go first. For me, honestly, like I kind of said just before, it's kind of an escape for reality for me. I also, honestly, I think the biggest thing for me is just the social aspect of it, being able to hang out with my buddies online. Gosh, I have people that I've talked to like literally every day, if not like every other day, for about 10 years since I got my first Xbox. And just having those friends, and you know, a couple of them I got to even meet up with in person, which is really cool. So yeah, just honestly the social aspect. Just playing games, you know, going to different planets and things like that is just really cool, and becoming somebody that you may not be able to in real life, you know, becoming a soldier, becoming a Spartan or whatever it is. So that is just really cool.
Yeah, for sure. I think to riff on that, I mean, it's such a complex topic because I think if you like dig down deep, what games are is they're sort of a reflection of the human drive to play. And so we create these games. Sometimes we, you know, if you're a kid on the playground, you're creating games with each other. You know, in this case, it just happens to be like a digital expression of that. But what's really interesting is it's even deeper than just human beings wanting to play with each other. It's actually across species, it turns out. So you'll see little, of course, dogs and cats, they play it with little balls and you know, throw the bone, and the dog will go grab it. They play with each other. And of course, you know, if you've got dogs and cats, you know, you can play interspecies as well. So it seems to be something that's really, really deep in sort of our evolutionary tree. And so when it sort of gets to us as humans, this ability to like Blake said, to wear different skins, to sort of embody the different behaviors, role play, as it were. And I think that's really important, because I think what play kind of is, broadly speaking, is it's a way to train your brain in a safe place and way, that will allow you to hopefully contend with a pretty sometimes dangerous and hostile world. You know, if you're on the savannah, 2 million years ago, if you go out and you don't really know either how to fight or hunt, you're going to be in a lot of trouble because the animals out there, have an edge on you. But the social interaction is also super important, like Blake was saying, which is, you're learning how to trust people and interact with them both physically, but also in terms of, your ability to communicate. And games, like, they're evolving to such a degree that I think that they really enhance this natural human phenomena of playing. So it's sort of a real deep, real broad way of looking at games. But, I think there is, as people who play games, I think a lot of times we'll get criticism for, oh, you should, go outside and play or go out and get a job. But I mean, I'll tell you, as a game developer, a lot of what I have learned just in terms of game development and creating complex things, of which, video games are one of the most complex things that you can develop. A lot of like my ability to multitask and manage comes from experiences I had when I was a kid playing RTS games, real-time strategy games, and having to like juggle all those plates. And so we can dive into a bunch of that stuff, but it's just such a deep and fascinating subject. And to be both a creator and a player in the space, it's a pretty big honor. And I love listening to guys like Blake and you as well, Jesse, talk about what they get out of games. I think it's just super fascinating. I'm just curious to hear your thoughts, Jesse.
No, I'm very jealous of anyone who gets to be in your position, because like I do a lot of creation around games, but I've never made a game. So the idea that you don't just get to experience video games, but you actually are taking a very active part into creating a vision of a new game that it would not exist in large part without you. And that's a really cool perspective to get, is just what gaming means to not just people like us, me and Blake, that play them, or like I write about them, and I've had ideas for games. Like one of my favorite things to do is we have an article series that I really enjoy doing called 5 Games, where I would pitch like game ideas.
Great.
But that's as close as I'll probably ever get to like making a game, because it only exists up here and in my article. But it's really cool to hear your perspective, and yours, Blake, as well. Because I honestly, Blake, I really align with a lot of what you said as well, because because I'm in similar shoes. I've been playing games for as long as I can remember. I'll you guys hit on a lot of big points that I agree with. I'll second all of it, but I would add and kind of agree to the social aspects for it. Is like, just for example, like Blake and I have been friends for years, and like we do a lot of, we hang out and all that stuff, but it's all virtual now because we no longer live in the same state. So what's really cool about that is video games is a tool that can allow friends to keep in touch in a way that would be difficult with just texting or social media. Like that's hard to maintain a really good friendship when you're only seeing pictures that people post, or the occasional text message. When you're not interacting in other ways, it's hard to like maintain things to talk about. So having video games to connect people around the world is a really powerful part of it, because we talked about it in one of our other panels about just the unifying factor of games, about how when you're walking down the street and you see someone wearing a t-shirt of a video game that you really enjoy, how total strangers can become instant friends. I told a story about how I was sitting in a restaurant like a month or two ago, and I had my Apex Legends shirt and my hat on, and just one of the busboys came up to me, was like, "Oh, you like Apex? That's awesome. What do you think of the new season?" And we talked about like what our favorite legends were. It's like this total stranger and I talked for like 10 minutes about a video game, just because we had that thing in common. And I think it's a really cool unifying factor, that total strangers can become instant friends, or good friends can maintain long distance friendships because of video games and having that medium. Because video games, it's not that you just talk about what you like about it, but video games allow you to play with each other, and you work together, and you continue active collaboration, even if it's just in an online multiplayer game. So I really agree with that section of it. I think another big one for me is, aside from the social, but just like the storytelling. Like part of the question was what made games such a special medium. The social is definitely a huge part of it, but I also think just having an active participation in your story. I prefer playing video games far more than even just watching a movie or watching a TV show, because it's all passive. It's just a story being told at me. And there's nothing wrong with that, but having an active participation in a story, even if it's single player, like I think the first part of that is the big argument for the benefit of online games. They have place and they have value in a lot of ways, but also the single player story, the narrative, narratives that you have some control over. So right now I'm playing through The Quarry, which is one of our games I'm working on for a review, and it's a very narrative and choice-based game. And you're just going through, you're making decisions, and based on your decisions, who lives and who dies, and those types of stories are really cool. And my favorite game of all time is a narrative game, that's Mass Effect, that allows you to have a control in the story. You make decisions that impact the outcome, and you get to meet characters. It can just be really cool. And to your point about people who don't understand games, that are just like, go outside or get a real job, and it's like, well, I've been to other planets, so screw you and anywhere you could possibly go. I love it. Like I annoy people with that sometimes, where they're just like, I want to go to Europe. I'm like, I played Assassin's Creed. I've been to London. It's cool. Like it's really cool because gaming can allow you to go places where we could just never go, no matter who you are. They don't exist anymore. They're too far away. So we get to experience worlds and places in a way that's not possible in any other way. So I think those are some of the things I think is special about the medium. But I think you guys really hit it both on the head with the social aspects. And I didn't even think about the kind of the instinctual human nature about like wanting to play. Like your take on that was actually very fascinating. I never looked at it that way. But you're absolutely right. There's something innate, whether you like games or not. Like everybody likes to play something, whether it's sports or gaming or a board game. Like there is something very human about playing games, and it doesn't have to be video games, but just gaming in the broadest sense of the word is very human. And I like that perspective. We all like games, so let's talk about a huge sector of the gaming world, and that's indie games. And why is the indie space so important for the gaming industry? What are some indie titles that really inspired you? Is it maybe your favorite indie game? Is there an indie game upcoming that you're really looking forward to? And James, I'll make this question a little bit easier for you, because I know a little biased on maybe some of the answers to those questions. So I'll preface, besides Project Genesis, all of those things, because I think we're all very excited for that game. I can't wait for release. And maybe we'll do it. We can do like a quick plug at the end for that. But like, and also being in indie space, but you have a unique perspective because you also have done AAA before. And I've asked you that question in an interview of like what the difference is between your experience in AAA and indie. So maybe you can talk about that. But let's talk about indie games. What do you guys, Blake? How about we start with you, and then we'll go on to James. Do you have any indie games that you really like? Is there one that stood out to you? Anything that you like about them?
Yeah, my answer will be fairly short on this one. I'll let James take up the time with this one. I know he's got some really good answers waiting to go. To be honest with you, I don't really have a favorite indie title game. I don't play a whole lot of indie games, but the indie game space I think is very important because it can help new developers get into becoming larger and maybe even into the AAA. I also think indie games are just really cool because from what I've seen, they really listen to the community, and that's really cool. Being like just the everyday gamer, a lot of the indie games that I've seen, I'll read comments on their games and everything, and people will just comment like, "Hey, this would be cool if you added this," or "Hey, you should add this feature," and they listen, and that's really cool. Like with the big title games, like people will say like, "Hey, this would be a really cool feature to add," and you don't get it. You never hear anything. You don't even get a response. But from the indie developers and everything, they listen to their community to improve their games, and they build off of what people are giving them as from feedback. And I think that's really cool. I know there are some big indie titles out there that people play all the time. I know I have a couple friends that like specifically only play indie games. And that's really cool. I think, I think indie games are honestly like probably one of the most important things, because without them, I'm sure even the AAA title developers and everything take from some of the indie developers, on ideas and things that they might be too afraid to try at first. And there is actually a new game that's coming out. I know we'll get to this in a little bit, but the High on Life game that's going to be coming out, I think is actually an indie title, and that was actually my top one that I'm excited about. But we'll touch on that later.
Before we get to you, James, I just wanted to add, it's like there's a lot of different spectrums of like types of games. I consider myself pretty balanced. I feel like I spend as much time playing indie games as I play AAA. And there's definitely a lot of gamers out there that focus 90% of their time on AAA titles. And there's nothing wrong with that per se. And on the flip side, there's developers who prefer, gamers that prefer, the indie space and maybe don't play a lot of AAA titles because I look at the division, and this may not be a perfect analogy, but I look at the division similarly to how films are made. Is like we got Blockbuster, which is a different experience from the more artistic films and just the way that they're made, the stories that they tell. And I feel like they both have their place. Like, I don't mind popping some popcorn and watching Transformers 17, but on the other end, I would like to experience more artistic films. And I think gaming has a similar division where like, there's the AAA block. I mean, I play my Call of Duties, I play my Apex Legends, I play the big guys, but I also spend a lot of time finding these hidden gems. And not every indie game is going to be everyone's taste. But one thing that I'm really excited about is that I feel like that line is getting more and more blurred. I was having this conversation with the developer around just Unreal Engine 5 and how like we're starting to see more and more indie games that if you didn't know they were indie, you wouldn't know they were indie. Like the tools are getting more and more powerful, empowering more and more developers to make games that visually can be on par. And it's not even just about like, not saying that indie games are ugly, but like it's not that. It's the idea that different art styles, the indie has dozens of art style options, whereas AAA has different. And there's always been this misnomer that it's a budgetary difference and that indie games are always going to look a certain way. And that is becoming less and less true. And it's not that it's even a bad thing to have more simpler graphics. Like some of my favorite games that were indie have very simple graphics, but there's a difference between simple and bad, and people don't always understand that. And even bad, quote unquote, bad graphics isn't even always bad because other aspects of a game. It's not the most important thing. But where I'm getting at is we're entering this era where we're seeing more indie games that are indie in name only, in terms of that they don't look like the stereotype, and so when you talk to a lot of gamers, you say indie titles, there's certain mental images of 2D platformers and older art styles. And again, nothing wrong with those things, but we're now seeing the birth of the AAA indie, where like games like several of the trailers we have for Infinite Summer, and I would include Project Genesis in this list of games that are 3D, high resolution. These are games that are high production quality, that are being pulled off because their teams are talented, because the tools are powerful, and we're getting games that look really cool that can attract gamers who don't normally get into the indie space. So that's something that I think is interesting about how the indie space is changing and how the tools are evolving. James, let me hand it over to you. What do you think about this question?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And actually, before I jump to it, I'm curious from your guys' perspective as gamers, whether it's casual, hardcore, but guys who are really interested in gaming, who it sounds like it's a pretty significant part of your recreational time, if not your lives. And the indie space, I might get this wrong, but it was something like 2017, 2018. I think there were something like 7,000 games released on Steam, of which I don't have the exact number, but I presume a significant percentage were indie titles. I just looked it up here. In 2021, it was 10,000 games that were released on Steam. So the number seems to only be going up. And I was curious from your guys' perspective, does it feel overwhelming, the amount of games and options that you have, or do you feel like, no, this is like, I love the amount of content that I can pick and choose from? Or do you feel like, oh man, there's all these cool parties that are happening that I can't get to, and shoot, and now we got this new batch of stuff that has come out. So I was always curious, like as guys who are in it and playing it, what's your perspective?
I have a
from
perspective,
the amount of games.
But Blake, I'll let you go first, and then I'll add on.
Okay. For me, like I see a lot of the games, like there's like always games coming out. Like when I go to I'm on Xbox, so when you go to the Microsoft Store and stuff, and you see like how many games are coming out, I don't really look at it as overwhelming, only because I can say, oh, that one doesn't interest me, and I'll move on. So to me, I look at it as, does it interest me or not, and then I'll just move on. And there's so many to choose from. If not a whole lot interests me, I just kind of forget about them and keep on scrolling. So for me, I wouldn't say it's overwhelming. I kind of like the amount of different options to choose from and different games and stuff, because there's something for everybody. And that's just my view on it. Is if it doesn't interest me, just keep on scrolling.
I do find it overwhelming because the position that I'm in is that every year Game Infinite puts out annual lists, and I'm planning to add another one this year. I've never done a worst list because I try to keep things positive, but several releases and several controversies are like, no, I'm tired of this. I'm going to write a worst list. But I also try to, like, if a game's bad, I typically sometimes don't finish it or keep playing it enough to do it. Like, I want to focus on the good games because there are so many each year. So sometimes there are games that are like, this sucks, I'm not gonna finish it, and then I never do the review, I never play more of it, because I'm like, I don't want to waste my precious time continuing to play a game that I don't like, which is why most of my reviews skew positive, because the negative ones I just like. I try to be very positive when it comes to gamers. I like working with devs, I like talking with developers, like building relationships with them. So I don't particularly enjoy hating on a game unless it's just awful, it's never been released. Like Babylon's Fall, calling that out. And that was like one of the worst reviews I put out. I was just like, please, to anyone who reads this, please don't buy this game. But ultimately, I find it very overwhelming, just the amount of games that release every month. And the thing is there are so many of them that and sometimes they're so long. There was one month where we had I remember there was 3 or 4 games dropping in the same month that I was interested in. And every single one of them were 100-hour games. And in my position where I want to play these games, I want to make sure I can play enough of a game to where I can review it, to put out a review, but also I want to have enough games played every year so that I can do my top 10 lists and highlight Game Infinite's top games of the year. And we do this big end of year event, and it's so much so that I kind of have this mental rule that I break it sometimes, but I have this mental rule of I try to only focus on current year games. And there are times where there's an old game that I don't want to go back to because it doesn't count for this year. It's a previous year's game, and I feel guilty playing it. During the Steam summer sale, they had Portal 2 for $3. I was like, oh man, I haven't played Portal 2 in 10 years, and it's $3. So I got it, and I've been playing it. Man, this is so fun. But every minute of it, I'm feeling guilty because I'm like, there's no point in me playing it. I can't count it for this year.
I feel guilty for playing.
I literally feel guilty because no one wants a review of Portal 2 in 2022. I can't write anything about it. I can't record any video from it. It's not gonna no one wants it.
Oh man.
And I have no list. I did last year. I created a best revisits list for remasters and remakes and ports and things, trying to give me some leeway to play older titles. Because sometimes remasters come out and remasters don't count for new year lists, but it was things like that. But Portal 2 is not a remaster. It was just cheap and I wanted to play it, and it's an awesome game. But I find it overwhelming because just the backlog is impossible to ever get to. But there's also so many new games coming out, and especially if people who play AAA games only, exclusively, they don't necessarily have that same problem because AAA doesn't put out games as often. And when they do, they're clustered together, and you get months of dry spell after that. And I remember, if you may have seen this, but there was a little bit of a beef on Twitter between Xbox and, I say beef, but it was just social media jabbing. But I forget who it was. I want to say it was Kotaku or IGN. Don't quote me on that. I don't remember who it was, but someone put out an article that said, basically said, Xbox has no games coming out for the next whatever. This was before the Xbox event where they announced stuff, but it was something. Oh, they were claiming about how they were canceling Game Pass because there wasn't anything coming out for a while, and it was some article about that, and it was a bad take. And Xbox came out and kind of gave them a nice little jab back about like, tell us you play AAA only without telling us you play AAA only, because if you don't think there's any games coming out in the next 6 months, it's okay if there's nothing coming out that interests you. But if you don't think anything's coming out in the next 6 months, it's a hot take that only is, because in the AAAs, this is a weird year for AAA. Like we're getting a record long dry spell between Elden Ring and Holiday. Like nothing's dropping AAA. I think the next AAA game we have coming out is the Saints Row game that no one wants, and it looks awful. But long story short, one thing that I've it's not really a long story short, I've been ranting a while, but my point being is I've had conversations with AAA. Like I was with indie developers about consolidation of like, I was talking with one developer. I remember he made a really cool game. It had a really cool, interesting mechanic. Visually, it didn't look too distinct. It looked like any other 2D platformer that there's millions of. But I played it and had a really cool like physics mechanic that I hadn't seen before, and it was fun. I liked it. And he was telling me, it was just like, hey man, like no one's downloading my game. How do I get more people to see it? And I was like, hey, I'll help share. I'll talk about it a little bit. I'll give some shout outs. And I was trying to help do what I do with indie developers, and how we love supporting the indie developers and trying to help more people hear about their game. That was a big foundation of where Game Infinite came from, is helping developers spread out their news, being IGN for the little guy, as I've always said. One thing I kind of told him was like, have you ever considered just trying to like consolidate? Like there have been times where I've had the opinion of like, instead of 10 solo developers making 10 small projects, what if those guys came together and made one big project? So like you guys are an example of an indie team making a game that would be very difficult for one person to pull off. Right? Like Project Genesis is much bigger scope than a solo devs project. It's not that it's impossible for solo devs to make like high quality, high production games. It's just way harder. In fact, some of the Infinite Summer trailers and some of the developers we talked to, they're pulling off some pretty impressive looking AAA looking games, and some of them are solo developers. It's not that it's impossible, it's just way harder. And I see a lot of games where I'm just like, you guys have some cool ideas, but what if you just kind of like got together? Because there have been times where I've said like, I would like less games to come out that are higher quality. And that's true for AAA too. I'd rather get one really good AAA title rather than 5 okay ones. So I do find it overwhelming a little bit, because I think we have too many games come out in any span of time. And it's not that I don't want people to get into game development. I don't want more developers, but I would love to see more indie teams. Like I know talented people. So like one person I'm thinking of, he's a solo developer, really talented. And I've thought like, man, your game looks really cool, but imagine how much cooler it could be if you had 8 people helping you. And those games could be pulled off easier. So I think that would be that'd be my answer to that, is instead of having 1,000 games come out a month, if we got 100 that were made by groups of people rather than solos, I think we might have more gems, or just more people hearing. It would make the job of helping people hear about indie games easier. So like, I think what you guys are doing right, you have an indie team, you're making a big production game, people are excited about it and it looks cool. And I think it has the visual clickableness that people are going to want to try it. And if more developers take inspiration, that's why it was one of the things I liked interviewing you guys as one of our first developer interviews, is that you guys are doing a lot of things right. And I think it's going to get a lot of people excited about your game.
Thanks.
So, did you guys have like dedicated like social media, and like you guys are trying to let people know, and you're bringing players in, like you're taking some of the best parts of AAA, and this is probably part of your experience, but best parts of AAA, and you're bringing it to the indie space. And I think that's really cool. So that was a really long answer to your question. I'm sorry. Did anyone else have anything they wanted to add to that? We talked about that for a while.
Yeah, I think you're one of the roles that I think you play is the role of curator. Like you're doing all this work. So it's not just a casual experience for you or a recreational experience. Like you're actually putting a lot of heart and soul into it to try and help players navigate that space where, man, there can be a lot of noise. And I don't mean to like deride anybody's work, because I know that there's a whole creative expression component to it. So I guess to kind of riff off of what Blake was saying, that you get indies in the space, and this is their, even if they are solo, they're putting their vision out into the world as they see fit, which I think is great. And everybody should be able to express themselves creatively. But to your point, I think there's also, and when I say noise, it's really like there's asset flips, and there's a bunch of like games where people are really just trying to extract whether it's value or, you know, eyeballs or attention or whatever, as opposed to contribute. So there's an element of that, but yeah, I think to riff off of what both of you guys are saying, I think of, you know, you'd mentioned the AAA space, and Blake, you'd said, hey, maybe that we're in the AAA space, we're able to pull, whether it's mechanics or, you know, ideas or even bits of narrative. I think there's definitely something to that where AAA can pull from that space. But what I've noticed is that if you get into the AAA space, like you're saying, Jesse, like maybe at our level, since we've got some AAA experience,
I like that.
yeah, we are also putting ourselves in a position to take risks. And I think that's what indie, and why indie is so important, is because just like in films and books, sort of the independence, they're sort of at the surface area of all these interesting experiments, and a lot of them are going to fail, but some of them are going to produce interesting things that, you know, maybe it's a one-hit wonder in terms of its mechanic. But then you have other folks who are able to pull it together in a way that's coherent and cohesive and makes a really interesting gameplay experience from start to finish. And those titles, I think, are really important for the AAA space, because they've done the experience. They've done the experiment. They've built the community. They've tested the market. And so they're prime for consideration either of purchasing the intellectual property, or they're prime for consideration of just acquisition completely. And so I think with my AAA hat on, I think that's kind of how the publishers, broadly speaking, would see the indie space. But in terms of developers, indies is really crucial, because you are developing a community. I mean, it's exactly what you're saying, like that. You know, not only does the community get to contribute to the development of a game, but on the flip side, we get to hear from the community and figure out, well, what's important to you? What can we focus on? And, you know, my background is in production, which is like schedules and budgets and resources, stuff like that. Like, that's absolutely invaluable to hear what's important to the people who are playing your game. And, you know, how do we make it, you know, there's a dance, like you can't give everything, because there's timing considerations or maybe even technical constraints. But broadly speaking, like, it's great to get that kind of feedback. And if your community knows that, hey, this is a process and there's iteration that happens, that dialogue is a really fun one, really valuable dialogue to have. So, and again, you know, we are befriending people in our community and vice versa. You know, they're befriending us. So back to your point, Jesse, and also you made this point as well, Blake, that you know, the ability to bring people together, you know, that sort of transcends space. You know, no longer do you have to be stuck in a geographic location to make friends. You can make them anywhere, across any culture, and in any location. And I think that's really, you know, I think we all kind of maybe intuitively appreciate it, but yeah, I think it's really awesome to acknowledge how impactful that is for us gamers to be able to connect with other people all across the world. So I love that. I think that's another probably important component of indie, but games more broadly.
Yeah, I would really agree with the flexibility aspect of what you were talking about. Is like it is very visually evident, and huge indie gamer fans like myself, we see games that would never have been made in the AAA space. They're too experimental, they're too different, they're too unique, and they're too much of a risk. They're not a guaranteed success. And some of the best games that I've ever played in the indie space were very different, were very creative. I think that's what resonates with gamers that want something different. And there's most indie games that do really well. They have just something about them, some X factor, whether it's visual, whether it's a gameplay mechanic, whether it's story. Some of my all-time favorite indie games, just off the top of my head, like one of my more recent ones, Outer Wilds, is an amazing game. It's visually beautiful. It has a weird kind of premise. It's just an experience. And it was also very hard to review without spoiling. I didn't even want to tell people what the premise was, because once you discover the premise, it's better. Like I remember recommending that game to people about, like, don't even read the premise. Just trust me, just play the game. Just don't even, like, the premise spoils a part of the game. And I didn't even want to, like, it was really hard to review because it was basically just like, go play this game. Because it's really an amazing experience, but it was something that AAA would never make. Another one was Superliminal. Both of these are games I think that won our like Indie Game of the Year awards from Game Infinite, like what we declared the best in their respective years. Superliminal was a game I had waited a long time to play, because I remember seeing their original tech demo like 7 years prior, when they just put off the concept. And I had been waiting for that game for a long time. And before they even had a name before the game, it was just literally, this is a tech demo of the concept, and the game plays with perspective. And literally, it's hard to describe, but literally, like, perspective affects the real world size of the game, of items in the game. So when you bring something close to you and it looks bigger, it becomes bigger in the game.
So cool.
It was
so cool.
Just a phenomenal, some people was like, okay, that's a cool, like, gimmicky mechanic, but the way they told the story and the way it gave me Portal and Stanley Principle vibes of just being like in this weird world and you're walking through. So like, these are games that are just, they're unique, one of a kind. I know another very common, probably on almost most lists about indie games is Journey. That I remember the first time I played that one. That game's an experience. The ending of it is phenomenal. You feel like you're approaching the pearly gates itself. Like it's just a phenomenal experience. So I think that really resonates with me, is like some of the best games ever made are indie, period. And I think that's my short answer to the why is it so important, is because we get games that would not exist, that just they're too big a risk, too different, that AAA could never pull it off. So we get to see the creativity flourish. And to your point, James, about the noise, is like, that's why I want to do my best to try to get rid of some of the noise so more people can experience these games that are really, truly amazing. So I wanted to talk about June. June is an important month of the year for gaming news. It is when that's why I decided we'd do our first ever annual Infinite Summer event, where we focus on gaming news, recapping the big events, bringing our own trailers to the party, doing recaps and doing these discussion panels and interviews. It's been a lot of fun, but there's several big events that happened in June, and we did recap articles on all of them. I'll put them down in the links below for those of you watching. But for here, and while we're discussing this, I would like for here, whether it could be the Xbox Bethesda event, it could be IGN Summer of Gaming, Summer Game Fest, the PlayStation First State of Play, whatever dropped this month. Capcom did a mini event as well. What were some of your standout favorite moments? What was your favorite announcements? Maybe like pick like a top 5, and we'll talk about those games.
James, you want to go first on this one?
Sure. And I'll keep it short. I'll keep it a little bit shorter than 5, just because I'm stoked about a couple. So as a huge fan of the Dead Space series, the big standout for me was Callisto. And I'm so stoked that crew is working on another title. Back to your point, Jesse, it's like the narrative in the Dead Space games. Like I was completely sucked in, completely immersed. And so if they're bringing that kind of storytelling to Callisto, which I'm sure they are, I cannot wait to see that title. Another one that whose trailer has been coming out this month is Street Fighter 6. And I've always been a huge fan of Street Fighter, all the way back to the original. In fact, they had an arcade game once that had this pad. This is back when they had arcades and you had to put 25 cents in to go play. Someplace else, you didn't play at home. Anyways, they had these pads where you could punch them, and the harder you punched them, the harder the kick or the punch was. So that was pretty cool. But anyway, Street Fighter 6 coming out, and the physics and mechanics, and the weight of the character. Always a huge fan of the art style. So those are the two sort of big AAA games, and the one that's just silly and goofy, and I cannot wait to see it, which is the Goat Simulator one. That trailer that I saw there was absolutely awesome. And normally I don't go in for that kind of stuff, but for some reason it just had me rolling. So I'll leave it there. But those are the three big ones that I'm looking for from the announcements.
We'll talk about those. So we had Callisto, Street Fighter 6, and Goat Simulator 3.
Yep.
And Blake, what about you? What were some? We'll talk about those. We'll circle back. But Blake, what were some of your standout moments?
First I gotta say, Goat Simulator, that's just a classic. You gotta love it. Yeah, some of my favorites, I have a little list here. Do you want me to start with like my most favorite one, or just go through the list?
Whatever sounds good. Yeah, whatever you're most excited.
I was pretty excited about the Redfall game that's coming out. It's like a vampire shooter. That one looked really cool, really pretty graphics, and it looked like a really fun game to play with friends online. From what I saw on the trailer, you know, the different characters have like different powers and abilities and stuff, and I thought that was pretty cool. And they kind of showcased like working as like a team, like with one character using their powers, and then how it benefits the other teammates and stuff. I thought that was really cool. And yeah, it looks kind of like almost like a Dying Light in a way, like where it's like a zombie-ish kind of, you know, it's like dark and you're kind of sneaking around corners and stuff, watching where you're going, and then all of a sudden a vampire comes after you. So that one looked really cool. I was also excited to see Arc 2 coming out. I know the first one was pretty popular. A lot of my friends had played it. Yeah, Arc 2 looked really cool. It looks like they really improved with like graphics and stuff over the original. So that was pretty cool to see. The Starfield game, I know there was a lot of mixed feelings about it, but I thought it looked pretty interesting. I don't know how, like for myself, I don't know, like it looked interesting to like play it. I just don't know if it would be a game that I personally would like stick with for a long time and play it for like a long term, like some other games. But it looks pretty interesting. So I'd be curious to kind of see gameplay on that, seeing like kind of what it's like as you progress through the different levels and whatnot. My absolute favorite game that I'm very excited about is High on Life, which I think we had talked about just like very briefly earlier. I think it's an indie game. That one looked really cool. It kind of reminds me a little bit when I first saw it of the Ratchet and Clank games on the PlayStation. With like, you know, Ratchet and Clank, you got these like crazy different like weapons that all do different things. And there was one, I can't remember from which Ratchet and Clank game, but there was a weapon where you could fire it and there would be like these little like robots that would attack the enemy. And on the High Life game, there was kind of something similar where they fired the weapon and there were these little like baby like minion things that would attack the different aliens. And I was like, that looks like Ratchet and Clank. And I was super excited about it, just like how like crazy it looked. It looked really cool. And the graphics were incredible too. Like the art style of it was really, really cool. And I'm a sucker for good graphics. So that was exciting to me. And then lastly, I was going to say, I was also excited. Jesse, I know that you know that I like the flight simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator. And they just celebrated their 40th anniversary. And I was going to ask both of you guys if you got a chance to play the game. And also if you got a chance to fly the Halo Pelican that they had added.
Oh man, I'm a huge flight sim fan, but I haven't played it in ages. But I think you just inspired me. I gotta go check it out because it looks incredible. I mean,
cool.
And I'm, yeah. Oh man, cool. All right.
Flight Sim was one of those games that it launched on PC before I got my gaming PC. And I only had the Xbox at the time, but it was before the Series X came out. So I didn't play it at launch. And then I eventually got my gaming PC and I tried to download it and it just, I couldn't get it to download. It was so huge. It was like 150 gigabytes. And every time I went in, it wanted like 80 more gigs. And I'm just like, I just want to play the game. So I eventually gave up on trying to play it. And then I eventually played on my Series X. And I was getting a little bit of that. This game launched last year, guilt, because I was joking before. But because I was trying to, but I was just like, hey, we got new content. I have an excuse to go back, and I wanted to play the Pelican. And they were announcing like it's not out yet, but they announced the first airplane ever, the Wright brothers plane. I was like, I want to play that. That'd be cool. So I tried playing. I downloaded on my Series X, right? And I don't know what it is, but the UI on the Xbox is
kind of funky.
It's so weird. Like
you can tell it's a PC game.
It is so like I couldn't get it to click on things. I was trying to get it so like I just wasted 100 gigabytes to download. So I literally uninstalled it, and I'm going to reinstall on the PC and give it another try. Because I'm like, I really want to fly the Pelican. And this, I played a few rounds where like, I call it rounds, not really rounds, but like I played a few hours of flights. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for. I played a few flights and it was fun, but I'm like, I don't know how. Someone was drunk when they made the Xbox's UI for that game. That is a PC game that right now has no business being on the Xbox. Because I'm like, just getting it to like move around and click on things. There's no actual cursor. Oh, yeah. It's weird. It's hard to describe, but I was just like, it was literally like, it was telling me to do something, and I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to do it. Maybe my version was bugged, and I'll get someone that says my Xbox version is fine, but like I could not play it. It was unplayable on my Xbox. But
yeah,
the game's fun. So I got to re-download on the PC.
Yeah, it's definitely a game that you can tell it's meant really for the PC. It is playable on Xbox now, but yeah, you can definitely tell if you're using an Xbox controller. It's definitely kind of funky. I've seen people that have like the yoke, like the actual yoke and stuff that you can use on the Xbox, and that works really well. Or same thing on PC. But yeah, it's definitely better on a PC. And I have had a glitch with the Pelican specifically on the Xbox, where is if you use the rudders, it doesn't want to turn. So that was kind of frustrating. I had to go to like plane mode to make my turn, and then back to hover mode. Really quick, I was going to also mention, have any of you guys seen the new Top Gun Maverick movie?
Yeah.
Yeah, Microsoft Flight Sim has a whole Top Gun playlist where you can land on the.
Get out.
Yeah, it's
Get
really
out of here.
Cool.
Oh,
it's
boy.
really cool. Yeah, and they added the SR-72, I believe is what they call it. It's the fictional plane, and you get to go Mach 10, and oh my gosh, that was a fun playlist. I actually played that, for hours. It was really cool. It brought me back to Flight Sim, playing the Top Gun Maverick playlist. Yeah, really cool events.
That's awesome.
They even have the ones where you fly really low through the canyons, and you go inverted to make your turn in, and your character will start to black out if you hit a certain amount of G's.
Oh man,
really, really cool. I would definitely recommend going back to play it.
That's cool.
Specifically, even just for that. It's definitely worth it.
I need to free up 150 gigabytes of space on my PC so I can re-download this, because I could not play on the Xbox
nowadays.
But no, I do want to try out the Pelican and the Dark Star. Both look really cool, and some of the new ones coming out. I liked the game. It wasn't running well or working well on my Xbox. I need to get it on the PC. But no, I'm excited for the updates for that. Yeah, absolutely. It's exciting stuff. Let me share my top picks, and then we'll dive in and discuss the games that we're excited about. I had a couple. A couple that actually surprised me about how much I'm excited about them. We've had rumors of a Last of Us 1 remake for a while, and I was like, why do we need a remake of this game? The game looks gorgeous. It's fine. Like, it's not that old. Like, I didn't think we needed it. But then when they showed us the side-by-sides, I was like, damn, like that's pretty good. Like it's one of those things to where you don't notice it until you see how much more they could do. And they're like, hey, we've had 2 console generations, and like, was it like when it came out? Like, I think it came out like 2013. It's like 10 years old or something like that. So it's an old game, and it originally came out on the PS3, and I'm like, all right. And then when they showed the side-by-sides, I was blown away. So I'm very excited for Last of Us 1 remake. I think it's priced a little bit high at $70 for a remake, but it's one of those things where I'm really excited about it. They sold me on it in terms of, I did not think that was a remake, because we've heard rumors of it for months about the remaking the first one. I mean, like, you mean like a PS5 update or something? They're like, no, we're doing a remake. And I'm like, okay. So I didn't think we needed it. But when I saw it, I was blown away. A smaller game, maybe you probably haven't heard of it, but it's getting bigger. It's called Naraka. Some people may have heard of it, but it's a Chinese like fantasy battle royale, melee and more melee focused. It's really fun, has beautiful visuals, and it was getting a campaign. So it's actually been out a while. So it's not technically a new game, but it's been a multiplayer game, and they're launching a campaign in sometime in summer. And it also came to Xbox. So I'm really excited for Naraka. I've been playing it. I really liked it. It was on our top 10 list last year, I believe. One game that has been kind of really roller coaster in my level of anticipation is Overwatch 2. It was announced so long ago, and it was becoming the Avatar 2 of games, where I didn't think it was ever going to come out. Blizzard has been through a lot of controversies, so much so that when you say the Blizzard controversy, people go, which one? Like, they've had a lot of problems. They lost a lot of people. They lost like that leader of Overwatch. So like, I didn't really expect us to ever get it. And then when they played the beta, a lot of people's early impressions were the beta didn't add much. But Overwatch 2, we now have a release date. It still looks really good. Overwatch has a special place in my heart. It was one of my first like big ongoing long-term live service games I really got into. And I don't know, it's still supposed to have a single player campaign that comes out in 2023 that I'm really excited for. So it's inching higher in my anticipation. I'm trying to keep my anticipation in check, because I just really don't trust Blizzard to pull it off, and I don't want them to ruin my beloved game. But that it's still on there. I'm still keeping happy for it. One that I did not expect to get announced, but I was really excited for, was the Part 2 of Final Fantasy VII Remake. Final Fantasy VII Remake was a high contender for our game of the year the year that it came out. We gave it to Last of Us Part 2 but it's such a hair margin. And Final Fantasy VII Remake is just an amazing game. It sold me on Final Fantasy as a whole. Like, I was never a Final Fantasy person. I never really played the Final Fantasy games. The little bit I had experienced, I didn't really like. But Final Fantasy VII Remake it's just an experience. Like, we could spend the whole hour talking about Final Fantasy VII. And they announced the sequel to the remake called Rebirth. I'm really excited for that. And lastly, my number one pick, my most excited, is one that actually surprised me, because I've been prepping our most anticipated list. I do it every 6 months. I do a beginning of the year and a mid-year article where we do our most anticipated games. And I had this game in like the high 20s. Like, it was like we knew nothing about it. I'm not even a huge fan of the developer. I'm like, yeah, it's cool, but I know nothing about the game. I was excited for the idea, but it went from the high 20s to my number one most, not just the game that I'm most excited for out of June, but like right now, my most excited game. Like, this is my most anticipated game, period. And it's gonna be the number one slot when the article drops. I'm not sure the article is going to drop before or after this video, but I'm going to drop it before the end of the month. And that's Starfield. I know, Blake, you said that you are, you're kind of on the fence of it, and a lot of gamers are. But here's the thing: is I don't even really care for Bethesda's games. I've never finished a Bethesda game. I've never finished it. I've never even really enjoyed Bethesda's games. So it's kind of unfair to give them my most anticipated slot, because I was never someone who liked Skyrim. I was just never a Skyrim person. Every game I've tried to play from them, I've just really not liked. I don't know what it is about Bethesda, but for some reason I never liked their games. So I kind of need to keep my own anticipation in check. But I'm also such a space nerd that honestly, he sold me, and this game got the number one slot. And this is on the AAA list for the record. I explain how it works in the article, but ultimately in the AAA, like my most anticipated AAA, they sold me with one sentence, and that's 1,000 fully explorable planets. And I'm like, what? Like a giant open universe space sim where I get to build my own ship, go land on one of 1,000 planets, plant an outpost, and fly around and do space. And it's like, I was blown away by that gameplay trailer, where I'm watching it going like, some people are worried that the game's gonna be too big, that there's gonna be too many empty planets. And I'm kind of like, well, I'm kind of okay with that, because space is big and vast, and it's gonna feel real. I kind of like the idea of standing on a planet and being the only one there, like this whole planet to myself. Like I'm okay with the big empty nothing planet because that's just gonna be kind of a cool experience. I don't know. I'm cautiously optimistic because so far Bethesda's impressed me in no way. I've never been a Fallout fan. I've never been a Skyrim fan. Their last couple, you know, they Fallout 76 is people have heard about enough about that. But I'm like, it's such a cool concept that I'm willing to give it benefit of the doubt. I'm just super excited about Starfield. I love space. I want to fly around space. And unless someone's going to give me a job at NASA, it's probably going to be the closest I'm going to get to ever do that. So, all right. So those are my 5 most anticipated and most excited pieces of news from June. So let's go through it. James, let's start with your 3. Callisto. What do you guys think? What I know we talked about it a little bit, but Callisto is that is some gory stuff. Like they had to like cut some stuff from the stream. I was like, wow. Like one guy's like head's getting like ripped in half. Not like a normal decapitation. Like literally like I was like, okay, this game's a lot.
Yeah. I think it is what it is, as they say. You kind of know what you're getting if you know the history of the games that developers has made. So yeah. Did
you see Callisto, Blake? What did you think of it?
You know, I did see it, but I can't recall much of the actual gameplay. So I'll have to go back and check it out again. But that sounds
like
awesome.
A modern, very gory Dead
That sounds amazing.
And then you also had James. You also had Street Fighter 6. I've played a little bit of 5. I've never been a huge Street Fighter person, but it looks cool, and I'm very excited for it. The art style is very colorful and fun. What about Street Fighter 6 is standing out to you?
Well, so let's see, fairly deep history, as I mentioned, in street fighting games just as a player, but I worked at Nintendo when Killer Instinct was coming online. And then there's this sort of resurgence of Killer Instinct recently for basically they sort of created a really cool live service model with fighting games. And so just sort of as somebody who's observing maybe where fighting games can go, I think it's intriguing just in terms of its business model and how it relates to Street Fighter. And I think that's kind of the space that I live in. I'm curious, Blake, I don't know if you're if you're a fighter player very much, but yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I remember playing it kind of like you were saying, where you go to like an arcade or something. I actually have a specific memory playing it at I was invited to a Super Bowl party one time. And cool. Jesse, I think you were actually there at Marie's house. And in the specific basement that we were in, she had just had like all these arcade games and stuff. And I remember playing a couple of the different Street Fighters and stuff like that. So when I hear Street Fighter, I just think of that, like classic, just this fighting game. And now that they're coming out with this one, I just think it's really cool, kind of like a retro-y throwback, but yeah, no, that it's going to be a cool one, I think.
Yeah, it should be interesting.
Now, I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be cool to see where the fighting game genre can go into next gen, and like what can they really add? Like this genre, like it's one of those things where like it's easy to feel like it can be capped out, but like I don't think so. Like I'm sure there's more that they're going to like. What are they going to bring to the table to prove like what does a next gen Street Fighter look like? How are they going to evolve upon it? The fighting industry genre, like the fighting genre, is one of those things where like what can they do with physics? What can they do with like how characters react to each other? Like I would love to see what a next gen fighting game looks like, and maybe that'll be Street Fighter 6. Maybe it'll be a different one of the big names in the fighting industry. So I'm excited for that. I want to see how they push the needle forward and give something new and different. I don't want it to just be a slightly prettier Street Fighter 5. Like I want to see what are they going to add to that to make it exciting and new. Let's also talk about, so Goat Simulator 3, your third pick, was one that really threw me. I was so confused because they really pulled a good prank on everybody, because I was like, because their trailer is a parody of the Dead Island 2 trailer, and they're making fun of the fact that this game had a trailer forever ago and never came out. And when I saw the trailer, I'm like, wait, this is familiar. Wait, is this Dead Island 3? I'm so confused. Are they showing the same trailer? It looks, my brain was like going a million things. I'm like, I was confused. I'm like, because it looks like that trailer, but it's not quite. but I
That's
hadn't
right.
watched that trailer in like forever. So I'm like, oh, Dead Island 3. Wait, what? I'm like, Goats?
I
And
thought
then
it
as
was
soon as
GTA. I thought there was like some sort of GTA DLC or something. I was
I
like,
was
what
so
is this?
confused. And then I saw the Goats. I saw the Goats, and then I was like, oh, okay, so it's Goat Simulator. And then they pulled another joke on all of us when they said Goat Simulator 3. And my initial brain was just like, wait a minute. When did Goat Simulator 2 ever come out?
Right.
I was thrown I was so confused after watching that trailer because I was just like, okay, they got me with the parody trailer, and then they got me again with the title. Because I think I even put in the recap, I was like, did I miss Ghost Simulator 2? I was so confused, and then I looked it up, and they're like, oh yeah, we just skipped 2. We're making fun of the fact that, and that's how it was actually a tie to the trailer. I read somewhere that they think the title is making fun of the fact that it took so long to come out, and that's why they made fun of Dead Island 2, because Dead Island 2 was announced like forever ago and never came out, so that's why they skipped the number, because it took so long. And it's like all a joke, and I'm just like, man, these guys are, there's a lot of humor and a lot of like joke in this marketing. That's what's really resonating for me. But yeah, I think it's fun. I'm excited for Goat Simulator 3. It was, I remember playing the original. It's such a goofy experience.
It's nutty. It's nutty.
Bizarre.
I just honestly, I want to see what that's going to look like. I mean, they've had a lot of time to work on it, and it's going to be cool just to see what can they do, what can they really add to that. It was a rather simplistic experience, so like what can you add into a sequel to make it something fresh and new? So
yeah,
I'm curious to hear more. All we got was that cinematic trailer, so hopefully it doesn't take as long as Dead Island 2 to come out.
Right.
So funny fact about that is, did you know, like, I haven't checked recently, but I checked, it was like, I think it was as early as like a few months ago, but you can actually like still pre-order Dead Island 2 at like Best Buy. I remember seeing like an ad for it. This was like, I think I checked last time I checked, it was like 3 or 6 months ago or something like that. But like, it was still like a game you could pre-order, even though this thing was announced like eons ago, and it's just never coming out. But I thought it was funny that it's still available to do that.
Oh my gosh.
Blake, let's go on your list. Redfall. What do you guys think of Redfall? Redfall was it was supposed to be the next big Xbox first party studio, got delayed into 2023. It's a vampire like shooter. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
I've been on the fence for it personally. I'm kind of like, it didn't resonate for me, but the gameplay trailer impressed me more. It looked interesting.
Yeah, it looks cool. I mean, you got your classic jump scares, but it's got a kind of blade like deterioration effect when you hit these vampires and kill them, which is pretty cool and dramatic. It looks really like visceral, and I could see this would be I think this would be a lot of fun to stream.
What about High on Life? That one was definitely the weird oddball of the event. What did you guys think of that one?
Love Squanch Games. Like, this is the crew from Rick and Morty, and they created their video game company. So I love the work, and if it's like Justin Roiland, it touches it or comes in its orbit, it's going to be good. So I'm pretty interested to see what this is like. I hadn't heard about it, but I'm absolutely intrigued.
Yeah, it looked really fun. One of my buddies, I think, sent me a clip. He's like, "Hey, did you see this?" And I checked out the trailer, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that looks like it's just like funny, but like really like just a fun looking game at the same time, And I think I watched like an interview with the developers talking about the game and how it was going to be kind of more like an adult humor type of game, and I was like, "That's going to be pretty funny." Knowing how Rick and Morty is, knowing how that show is, I'm like, man, if they're making a game like similar like that, that's just going to be a riot.
It's stylistic, but not like over the top. It's got a kind of I won't say realistic, but the graphics look really good on it, and the art direction's great, color contrast. It's actually quite beautiful in its own way. It's really kind of dense and sumptuous. Really cool looking.
Yeah. Yep. No, I agree with you on there.
I agree. It's one of those things where like I think it's going to live and die in its humor. So like as long as they like nail the humor with it, I think it'd be a really good hidden gem. I'm excited for it. It looks interesting. The art style is very goofy and fun, and like, yeah, I'm excited for to try out on High on Life. It's definitely it was probably the biggest surprise for me out of the events, just because I don't think it was leaked ahead of time. It wasn't something we were expecting. And let's talk about my list here. We had let's start with Last of Us 1 remake. Any thoughts on that? Some people are very opinionated on it. Some people don't think we need it still. Some people weren't as impressed by the side-by-side or haven't seen the side-by-sides, or maybe just think it's expensively priced. But ultimately, what did you guys think of it? I was impressed by the Last of Us 1 Part 1 remake. What did you guys think of that?
What you were saying, Jesse, about the price of it, I agree with you. I think it's kind of unfortunate that it's what'd you say, like $70. So yeah, I don't know if that's like a new trend now, because I know that the new Call of Duty game that's coming out now is also $70, is the cheapest version of the game. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit of a downside, but then again, I haven't seen the trailer yet, so maybe it is worth it.
I have written some lengthy and very opinionated articles. In fact, I've written multiple articles on the topic of the $70 trend in gaming and why I think it's going to hurt the gaming industry. I'll give the 30-second version of that. Is that we're seeing more and more studios that are trying to compete with rising costs, rising, the way the industries are going, the way the economy is going. They're trying to compete with that. And this was even before the economy went the way it was. The $70 game came before all that. And more and more studios are adopting that. And in my humble opinion, I disagree with that strategy. I think it's going to be detrimental. I have written my opinions on what I think would be a better strategy, because increasing prices does not always increase revenue. And there are like ways to prove that sometimes increasing prices can decrease revenue, because AAA, and I'll keep this short, but AAA struggles with planning out release windows, and we constantly get overcrowded windows. And then we get dry spells. And I don't understand why they do this. It has literally destroyed games because of release windows being poorly planned. Like even just look at 2022. We had 1 month where multiple big games dropped, and then the next 6 months that followed it, nothing from the AAA standpoint. And planning like that can cause failure. And we also see games that get discounted so quickly that it actually hurts their sales. Where like, so I've written in some of these articles about talking about how AAA needs to adopt the early access strategy for games that, to avoid like the Cyberpunks, the Fallout 76s, the Anthems. Every time these big, massive launch failures occur, I write an article and I talk about how if you had launched this game at half the cost and slapped that magic early access label on it, you would have saved yourself everything. And I know it's a simple version of all that, but ultimately, I could spend a whole video talking about this. Maybe I'll put one of the articles in the description below. But ultimately, $70 game's bad, especially when it's not even a full remake. I think that's my humble opinion. People can disagree with me. I'm probably still going to play the game because it looks amazing. But that doesn't mean I think it's worth $70. It's not like Demon's Souls. Demon's Souls is a remake in the entirety of the name. Like it is literally just a full ground up rebuild of a game. It's a new game. So that is a remake in its entirety. This, I remember in the recap article for Last of Us, I called it a remodel because it's unfair to call it a remaster, because remasters, you freshen up the paint, you maybe bump up the resolution and the frames per second because you have more horsepower to work with. Remasters can be very bare bones, very low effort. And that's not that they're bad. Like we want them. If you have an old game that was struggling to hit 4K, struggling to hit 60 frames per second, but you can pull that off now on Xbox Series X and PS5, great, do it. But those are remasters sometimes. And then remakes are full ground, like Final Fantasy VII is a perfect example. That's a whole new game. Like it has absolutely nothing of the original except elements of the story that they even changed some of the story. And then you get games that are in the middle where like they put a lot of effort into this. It's clear, like these are new character models, new animations. Like they're basically using Last of Us Part 2's engine to give us the original story. And there was a lot of work that went into it. But at the end of the day, they didn't have to write a new game. They didn't have to write a new story. They didn't even do any new voice lines. They reused all the old audio. So it's like, that's why I called it a remodel. It's more than a fresh coat of paint, but it's not a brand new house. It's that kind of that in between. So whether or not you think $70 that new trend is good, that aside, it's still not even worth kind of $60. This is an old game with a lot of work put into it. So I think this would have been more fairly priced at $30-$40, but that's just my opinion. But unless you guys have anything to add on that, we can move on to the next game. Any other thoughts on that?
I'm just mostly concerned for you because it looks like you're going to revisit another game that when you play it, you're going to start feeling guilty that you're not playing other games that you should be reviewing. So I'm just worried for you.
It'll count. It'll count because it can go on the revisits list that I do. So remakes, remasters, all of them count. So that I won't feel as guilty. Like it's just when I just straight up play an old game that has nothing to do with this year whatsoever. That's when I feel guilty, where I'm like, I can't review this or put it on any list or anything.
See, if I catch you playing that game, if I'm online and I see you're on that game, I'm gonna send you a nasty message.
James, Blake and I have
get on the new one.
James, Blake and I have this inside joke that we've had for years about that game old, because there was one. It was
I don't even remember what game it was.
You were playing some old game, and
it was like a couple months old, I think.
No, it was a couple of years old. Was it a couple of years? And you were asking if I wanted to play with you. I was just like, man, that game's old, and then it's ever since it's been like a running joke with us. Anytime it was like, that game old, man. Why don't you play something newer? So it's
love it.
About Overwatch 2. Any Overwatch fans? Anyone have any opinions on that one? I have mixed, very, very turbulent feelings about it, but I still want to be excited.
Yeah, I'm living through the pain that other people seem to be experiencing about Overwatch, both in terms of how long it's taken people to get their hands on it, and then I know there's internal turmoil at Blizzard Activision. But broadly speaking, I mean, just as an example game, that team produces incredible work, and really, I mean, they stick the landing on providing the kind of experience that you can only get from Overwatch. So I'm excited to see it, and let my friends, or excited to hear from my friends once they do get their hands on it. But yeah, I don't know if I've got a lot of insights other than, it seems like there's a bit of push-pull. Maybe they're excited to get their hands on it, a little bummed out that maybe it's taken as long.
When I said earlier that I don't exactly trust Blizzard to pull this off, I should be more clear in what I meant, in that I don't trust Blizzard leadership, the suits, the people at the top, because we could take our pick of controversy, with the most recent being Diablo Immortal. It's very clear we got this division where, like, I know the developers are talented because what they put out is amazing. It's the people at the top who are making some of the final decisions, the decisions of when to release things, monetization decisions. Those are the people I don't trust. Where, when they announced Overwatch 2 was getting rid of loot boxes, we all kind of quietly cheered at that small victory, and then, hey, that's cool. But my biggest fear is, like, what are they going to replace it with? What's that battle pass going to look like? Are they going to bring in some of these other things? And people are nervous about Diablo 4. And right now, Blizzard has, like, I think has 3 of the top 5 worst reviewed games. And that's because they just keep having these launch state issues. And it came out confirmed just a couple days ago that Overwatch 2 is going to fully replace Overwatch 1. So it's not going to exist, like, by itself. So when Overwatch 2's update goes out, everybody's going to be forced to do it. Everyone's going to be playing it. So there's launch issues. It's not like you can just go back and play the old game. So what I don't want is for the Overwatch experience to get worse. I want it to get better. I want more to be added to it. So I'm nervous because there are people in charge making poor decisions. But I feel bad because the developers are hard at work making these games. Like, I'm sure that everyone who worked on Diablo Immortal wanted to make a really cool game. And they made a good game, and it's the people at top that pushed out and enforced really bad decisions when it came to monetization, and that led to all of this. So I feel bad when good games fail because the suits at the top made bad decisions. I feel bad for the developers who put that in there. Like, and that's probably true of a lot of the biggest disasters in the last few years, like Anthem, Avengers, Fallout 76, Cyberpunk 2077, like some of the biggest disasters in recent years. I would be willing to blame 90%, if not all, of their failures to decisions made at the top. And that means that we had really good developers that were trying to make a good game that were not given enough time, money, or were ordered to do bad things. So that's where I'm a little nervous about Overwatch 2, but I'm also still excited because I know the team's talented. I know they have a great skeleton of a game underneath with Overwatch 1. So I'm excited, but I'm nervous. So let's end on my last one with Starfield. I know, Blake, you had some thoughts on it. I'm sure like Starfield's, I would say it's been a little, people are kind of in a similar position with Starfield that I am with Overwatch 2, where like it looks really cool, they're excited, but they're also very nervous. I agree with all of that. You know, Bethesda's last game by themselves was very bumpy, and this game's scope is insane. So I get all the caution. But what do you guys think? What were your initial impressions of Starfield? Are you excited about it? Are you nervous? What did you guys think?
James, do you want to go first, or do you want me? I can.
I'll jump in. I'm super curious because I actually have a question about this topic for both of you guys. So I'd love to hear from you, Blake. So it actually, you know, with a foot kind of in the previous game in the comments that you were making, Jesse. So, you know, in AAA, you basically have these, you know, these mega corporations, and each one of them has little fiefdoms within it. So you've got the marketing team, you've got the development team, which you accurately, you know, made a distinction about, monetization team. And so everybody's kind of got their agenda. And I know that on the development side, on the creative side, typically you're you know, you just want to make a great game. And then there's all these other considerations like, well, do we hit these launch dates, and marketing's got to build the hype and time the hype for the release. And if there's production issues, you know, it really bums us as gamers out. But this is where I was curious. So Starfield, you know, there's sort of this bittersweet kind of press that's out there. And when I think about Starfield, I think about it in the context of like Star Citizen, which has its own stuff. Then you have
it's the real Avatar 2 of games. It's never coming out.
Right. Yeah. And then you've got No Man's Sky, which is another example of wow, we really hyped it up. You get into it and it's, you know, well, we're supposed to have like these procedurally generated planets, and, you know, well, it's not great, but then as sort of there's redemption in that story too, where the game's turning around and starting to get fun to play. So, you know, here we have Starfield, and, you know, is it going to suffer the same fate? So really, I'm kind of curious, like, do you guys sort of map it that way in terms of comparing it against other games, launches, stuff like that? Or how are you guys perceiving Starfield? Because I think it's interesting as a title, space. You know, of course, I'm in that world with Project Genesis, but yeah, as sort of people who are interested in playing, what are your guys' thoughts about it?
Yeah, no, James, I agree with you. I think, you know, since there were other games that came out previously that were very similar to this new one, I think a lot of players are probably thinking maybe along the same lines as of myself, just being the everyday person, is it going to be pretty much kind of the same thing? Just new, you know, newer graphics, you know, different storyline, whatever it is. Or is it going to be kind of more unique? Is it going to have, you know, just like, you know, just different missions that you can go on, or just different activities that you can play through? And that was definitely, that honestly is probably one of my biggest considerations is, am I going to want to buy it, or am I going to not? You know, is it going to be too similar to the other games, or like you were saying at launch, is it going to, you know, what's going to happen? But you know, if I kind of forget or push away all those other thoughts of the other games and everything, and look at this one as an individual, I would say, you know, it looks really fun. The graphics are beautiful. The gameplay that they showed off looks really cool. But yeah, and I'm hoping that they kind of you know, look at what happened with the other games, and hopefully they'll kind of learn from any mistakes that may have happened previously, and maybe they'll try to do things differently, since it's a similar game, you know.
Yeah, my opinion on this topic is, and I've talked about this a lot. I've put a lot of thought into this topic of like game delays and like how to launch and how to avoid these disasters, because it's irritating to know that I know how to avoid this. Like I know it in my core that I could have stopped Anthem, Fallout 76, Cyberpunk. Like I know how they could have avoided it, but I don't know anyone there. Like they don't listen to me. They don't care about my opinion. But like I just know I know how to do it. And I've said I've done multiple articles on this topic because I'm very passionate about it because I'm tired of it happening. I'm still mad that Anthem was a failure. I was excited for that game. It was my number one most anticipated game, and I was excited for it. And I got the special edition. It's BioWare, like the people who made my all-time favorite game were making a new IP, and I was excited. And Cyberpunk was also my most anticipated game, and it looked amazing. And these are the people who made The Witcher. And here's the thing. When you take some of the most talented developers in our industry and they put out these explosive, just like all over the news PR disasters, it's not their fault. And we know it's not their fault. There's been too many exposés. There's been too many interviews. There's too many deep dives into what went wrong with these major titles. And it always boils down to the same thing. They all make the same mistake. The guys in charge, the people, not the people who make it the game. Doesn't matter how talented they are. The people in charge, the people with the money, the people with the season they're titled, the head of the studio, they make the same mistake. And that's the people making the game say, this is how long it needs to take to make. And they say, no, we're going to do it in this amount of time. And, you know, there were interviews about the developers who were saying Cyberpunk was supposed to be, they were like, this is a 2022 game. And the people at the top are saying, no, we're going to get it out in 2020, no matter what. And when you try to shave off 2 years of development and you try to force people who are actually making it, it's like, I remember I wrote an article about Assassin's Creed and how Ubisoft has made 1,800 Assassin's Creeds, and yet they somehow still don't know how long it takes to make. Or Watch Dogs. I put a side-by-side of, I remember Watch Dogs 1 had over a year and a half of delays. And I remember because I had like the collector's edition, like on pre-order, and I was so excited for Watch Dogs 1. And I ended up not liking it at launch, but it had over a year and a half, 2 years of delays. And yet I remember I have it a side-by-side of the same news article, same studio of Watch Dogs 1's delay and Watch Dogs Legion getting a delay. And I'm like, this is your third one, and you still don't know how long it takes to make. And it's because the people in charge, they get greedy. They want, like, we're going to get this game out by this date. And the people making it go, that's not possible. That's not even feasible. And that's why Cyberpunk got like 4 delays, and it realistically needed like a year of delays. And I've talked about this before about like and this is what makes me nervous about Starfield is Todd Howard is in the other camp. He would not agree with me on this. He's been quoted to say, it's not how you launch, it's how you finish. And I hate that mentality. I don't like that mentality of it's okay to put out a bad game and fix it later, because one of two things can happen is either A, you take the EA approach and promise you'll fix it later and then never do it. You know, Battlefield 2042, they ain't gonna fix that. They're gonna dump it and move on like they always do. EA does not stick to those promises of fixing those bad launches. They promised they were gonna fix Anthem. They didn't do it. They canceled it. They canceled the 2.0 version, and I'm calling it now. They're going to cancel Battlefield 2042 support. And you get so much bad press from a bad launch. Battlefield's a perfect example. And they either don't fix it later like they promised they do, or the few that do fix it later, you lose so much goodwill. People don't go back to it. Like No Man's Sky is the most commonly referenced example of the launched failure, fixed it later. But here's the thing. There are going to be countless gamers who were excited about it, but never went back to it. I'm one of them. I never went back to No Man's Sky. It was one of those things where like, you made all these promises, and yeah, I'm glad other people gave you more chance, kept going back to it, but I didn't. And you missed that first impression. And this idea, and going back to my original point of like, I know how to avoid these disasters, because it's not that the games launch with failure. It's not that they launch in bad states. That's not really, in my opinion, what irritates gamers. I don't think that's what it is. And that's what gets all the focus. Cyberpunk was a disaster. It was unplayable on PS4 and Xbox. You know, some of these, and those are probably maybe the worst states. And Fallout 76 is another example of a game that was darn near unplayable. And these are games that launched in such poor, unfinished states that they got legal action and like there was refunds and like it was all over the media. And I don't think that's actually what irritated gamers. And this is what the big studios, this is what Todd Howard doesn't understand. He doesn't understand that it's not that people are mad the game's unfinished at launch. What they're mad about is that they paid $60 and you told them it was finished. I don't want, because and this is why I've said before on multiple instances that AAA needs to adopt the early access strategy. You see, I've known people that bought, so I was a day one Cyberpunk 2077 player. I bought it, I played it, I didn't like it, it ran poorly. The story, I didn't like any of it. I was very disappointed in that game. And then I have friends who played it a year later. And you know how much that friend bought it for? He bought it for $10. And a year later, it was much better. And I was like, you are literally teaching gamers that if you wait, you're going to get it cheaper and you're going to get it better. What type of business model is that? If you are releasing games, say, oh, we'll fix it later. Like, yeah, but later it's going to be cheaper. And it's going to be, and those people are going to be like, my friend who bought Cyberpunk a year after launch for $10 was like, I don't understand what all the hate was. This game is fine. It's like, yeah, because you paid $10 for it and it's way better than when I paid $60 for it. That is not a good business model. Good business models, there's the early access. Those people, they pay less for early access. They feel like they're investing in the development and they also know they're getting a deal. Like if you save $10, you're like, okay, I saved $10 by buying it early. You feel like it doesn't, at that point, the state of the game doesn't even really matter because you know it's early access because you're being upfront with gamers about the game's state. I've said this before, if any one of those big names that I mentioned, Anthem, Fallout 76, Cyberpunk, Marvel's Avengers, if any one of them had launched as early access at half the price, disaster gone. Because they say, hey, like this game's playable, it's fun, but it ain't ready, but we want to get it to you guys. And we're going to give you all a discount for playing it early as a thank you for helping us finish development. Immediate controversy over, because you can't, because also like reviewers, streamers, people don't really want to be that harsh on early access games. When a game is in early access, it's kind of protected. You chalk up any bug you find, you're like, yeah, it's not finished yet, it'll get better. It's an upfront omission of, yeah, we're going to fix it later. And I think that the early access strategy would protect some of these games. And Todd Howard doesn't believe in that. He believes in the fix it later approach. And there's a long rant, I'm sorry, but it's one of those things where like, I wish that more studios would be like, either A, we're going to listen to the people making the game on how long it takes to make. And they did delay it. They there's good examples of the higher ups listening, like Halo Infinite needed the year that it got delayed. And they delayed Starfield from holiday 2022 to 2023. So like, there are times when they listen and they give long delays, and that's good. But you either need these, we have examples of studios just not listening to developers saying, hey, this is how long it's going to take. And you want it done in a fraction of the time, that's not going to be doable. And they don't delay it. And then we have examples of when they do, and that's good. But also sometimes games just need to get out. And like to your point, you were talking about how like there's a lot of moving parts. You got production, you got marketing, all this. I get it that sometimes delaying a game just isn't feasible. Maybe it's the right decision, but it's not feasible. But then you got to do it right. And like if some of these studios would take an approach that's proven to work, proven to protect your game against negative press because you're being upfront and transparent with gamers. This game is not ready. Like Blake and I, you and I played through all of Avengers together, right? That game was in a rough state at launch.
It was bad. Yeah.
It was bad. It was a lot of fun.
And I wanted to love that game too. I was so excited about it.
Can you imagine how much better just our perceptions of it would have been if we were playing through it? That game crashed on us more times than I can count.
It was hard to get in the same like before we even started a game, like just to get in the same like lobby.
Yeah. It was hard. Buggy. But imagine if you and I had paid half as much for it and they were upfront that it's an early access bait. Like if it had, they put that magic protection spell on it is what I call it. It would have been a much different experience. And the thing is about that is you're rewarding your early adopters instead of punishing them. That is what the launch it broken at 60 and fix it in 3 to 6 to 9 to 12 months later, when it's a half or a third or a tenth of its original price. The early access strategy rewards the people who buy it day one instead of punishing them. And that is a strategy that just makes people feel like, I remember when I paid $70 for Anthem, a game that they never even fixed, and finding it 3 months later for like $10. And I was just like, man, I felt like I got cheated. I felt like they punished me for being excited for their game. Like, I wanted to support them. I wanted to be a day one. Like, that's where I know developers get their money, is when you buy at launch. So I wanted to support them, and I felt punished with Cyberpunk, with Avengers, with all of these big disasters. So this is a very long answer to your question. I'm kind of ranting, and I apologize, but yeah, I'm gonna wrap it up. I'm excited for Starfield. I'm nervous that they're not going to learn from these lessons. We have 7 different examples of doing it wrong, one of which is their own game. And I'm like, Todd Howard, please learn from history. Please learn from your mistake. I don't care if this game comes out in 2024. Listen to how long your developers are telling you it's going to take to build it. And if it's not ready, tell us before launch day. Don't tell us afterwards when everyone's hating on it. I think if they do those 2 things, we could have a game of the year contender. If they don't, we're going to have another Fallout, another Cyberpunk. We're going to have all those things. So rant over. I'm done. That's my answer.
There's a takeaway for me in that, and just to, I guess, maybe put a punctuation mark on it, that your assertion that also AAA can and maybe should use the early access model. And there's something really interesting in that I hadn't considered. So I think, there's a lesson in there anyways for 8 Circuit Studios.
Yeah. No, it's a magic label that protects games, because you're admitting up front the state of the game. And it's not that all early access games are bad or buggy. Like, that's not even the case. There's lots of games in early access that are relatively bug-free and fun, but it's an upfront admittance from the developer that this game's not finished. Yep. And that's so much better coming before launch day, before you buy, than finding out after you've dropped $60 that this game's not good. And it's not, I'm not saying it's an end all be all. Like, there's maybe upper limits to that. But ultimately, I remember there was a popular YouTuber that I watched who gave a rather negative review of a game that was still in early access. And I remember just the comments were filled with gamers defending the game because it was in early access. They're like, this game's not even finished yet. They're still working on it. Give them a break. Like, that was the vibe. But when you say my game's done and they launch it, and you get the Battlefield, the 2042s and the Cyberpunks and the Anthems, people are like, you told me the game was finished and I paid 60, 70, $90 for this game and it's bad. You don't get the defense of gamers because you didn't get them on their side ahead of time. And one game that I constantly reference as an example of is PUBG. And I've said PUBG launched in early access, but no one really remembers just how bad PUBG was. I downloaded it on Xbox, and I remember, man, this game's ugly. Like, it ran poorly.
It was terrible.
It crashed. It looked ugly. It was bad. So, like, launch state PUBG on Xbox, and even just PUBG on the PC at the time, those games didn't look great. But when we list off examples of horrible launches, bad states, massive launch failures, PUBG's never included that. And in fact, PUBG is an example of a game's success. And I've said that, what did PUBG do differently than all these other games that launched just as bad? And I think it has to do with the fact that it was $20 and it was early access. And it took a good year or 2 or 2.5 years to get out of early access, but it wasn't hyped up as this, gaming marketing is 100% hype. It's all about hyping up, and there's no setting expectations. And early access is a great way to set expectations. And I think PUBG succeeded. Granted, that technically was an indie game at the time, but or indie-ish, AA, whatever you want to call it. But I think that's a good example of, that's a game that launched very, very ugly and very poor, but had no negative press because it was priced and positioned properly. And yet we get $60, $70, $80, $90 games that are not being positioned properly, and they're confused as to why people are unhappy. And I think that really just shows, like, for you guys making your game, like, if you need it to be out by a date and you can't delay it, but it's not ready, I've written multiple times, studios do not appreciate the value of the transparency. It's okay to say our game's not ready, but it's still fun and playable. That's an okay admittance. And gamers resonate with that. I like playing early access games. What I don't like is paying full price for games that I'm being told are finished and find out I'm playing an early access game. And I think that's what gamers don't like. Because the other thing about early access is it allows you to flip the depreciation of the price. You can have a $30 price tag that goes up to $40, $50 or $60. Whereas if you launch at 60, it only goes down. It never goes up.
Yeah.
And that goes back
Could
to—
I add something on that,
yeah,
Jesse?
absolutely, please.
I was going to say another cool thing about like early access games is you get to kind of see some of the progression too. You know, as they add new features and stuff like that. And yeah, like you're saying, like people know that it's not the full release. So to not set the expectations is, hey, this is it. You get to kind of experience the upbringing of the game almost. There's actually Grounded. That's I think was also kind of shown off in the showcase too. They're coming out with their full release now. But yeah, that's another example too. Like you were mentioning with PUBG, like where you can get it in preview for a lower price, and then you get to watch the game kind of grow and bugs will get sorted out and stuff like that. So I just wanted to add that real quick.
No, you're absolutely right. It's something that it's a topic I'm obviously very passionate about it. I've talked about it a lot, but it's a model that works that would solve so many of these controversies. So there are games that I was really excited about that I know could have been saved by a smarter approach. And that's the thing is like if these companies had been a little bit more honest. See, it's just like the thing. I think they don't put enough value into how blindsided gamers were. Like if you guys remembered just how hyped up Cyberpunk was, like that game was hyped up to unfathomable levels. They had Keanu Reeves, like they had the marketing and the hype for that game was unreal. And unreal. They are surprised when people were not happy that it didn't live up to that. And if they had just done anything to warn people, if you had been warned and then financially compensated, people would have been happier. I think, I think when Cyberpunk launched, I gave it like a 3 or a 4. It was bad.
It was pretty low. I remember that. Yeah.
It was bad. It was one of the worst reviews I've given. I was just like, this game is just an absolute failure to what was promised. And if I had paid half as much for a product that I had been warned a month or 2 in advance, because I could even write the PR social media.
No, I think we lost his mic.
Yeah, Jesse, we lost your audio.
I think I tapped it. Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you go. Yeah.
Gotcha.
Okay. There's a mute.
I was wondering if that was just.
I talked with my hands and I hit it. But yeah, if they had just imagine, I can just imagine what the alternate timeline would be like if any one of these games, whether it be Anthem, Fallout, Cyberpunk, someone took to Twitter and said, hey, rather than delaying the game, we've made the decision to launch an early access. The game's still not ready, but we think some of you might enjoy it. And here we're updating the price to be $40 for a limited time. Disaster gone in its entirety, not a little bit, but it's an entirety. Because there's going to be people that are like, okay, I get to play it early, yay. And then there's going to be people, I'm going to wait for the final release. And those people are the ones paying $60, not $10. And it would have protected their wallets. It would have protected the investment. It would have maybe opened the door for sequels. It's such a simple strategy. And maybe not everyone's convinced that it would work. But I'm thoroughly convinced that all of those disasters would have been easily avoided with a little bit of transparency and a little bit of number calculating. So that's all I've said enough on it. So
so yeah, I totally agree.
Do you guys agree with my point? Do you think that maybe not like saved it entirely, but do you think that I'm right on that? If like, what do you think of my idea?
I think so.
Yeah, I'm with you. 100% agreement.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I know we've been going a little bit long, so I want to appreciate you guys. We'll wrap up on final question, and then we'll end the stream. We'll end the panel. Was there anything? I know we've kind of gone away from the June announcements a little bit. We went on it, but I think it's a cool topic, and I'm glad I got to talk with you about this, about it. And was there anything missing in June that you guys wanted to see? Was there a game we were hoping for, an announcement we were hoping for that just wasn't there? What was missing? Any things that was missing for you guys?
Not for me. And part of the reason why there's not, I'm aware of not as much missing is just I'm so heads down in product development that
That's okay.
I'm like a little gopher. I pop up and I'm like, what's going on out here? Okay, cool. So yeah,
That's very fair.
yeah,
Very fair.
nothing missing for me.
What about you, Blake? Was there anything that you were hoping to see during June that wasn't there?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't know what all to like expect or what to kind of hope for, but and it might have not have been the right event for it, but I've always been still waiting for the next GTA.
Yeah,
Still waiting for that one. I know a lot of people have been talking about it for a long time now. But yeah, I'm still really looking forward to whenever that day is.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think GTA is one of those things where like so many people are waiting for it that I'm kind of on this whole rant that I've been on for the last little bit. I think I'm glad they're taking their time because
I was just gonna say,
it's when it drops, it's going to be filling one of the biggest pieces of shoes it can. So they cannot rush it. Like GTA 5 is the biggest and most successful piece of any entertainment media ever. Like not just video games, like there hasn't been a film or anything that's made more money than GTA 5. It is the most successful game or piece of entertainment media in history. And GTA 6 is either going to fail to live up to that or surpass it. And surpassing that is not
hard
easy
to do.
So like I'm kind of like, look, it's okay that this game has been out forever and it's on its third console generation because GTA 6 it needs to be huge. And that's probably one of the few games that I think is okay to call $70 because it takes so long.
I would probably pay like over 100 for the next GTA.
I saw a meme on Facebook the other day where it had the picture of the GTA 5 cover with the girl holding their phone. They're like, she has an iPhone 4. That's how long this game has been out. Like, when is the next one coming? So I agree with that. I would have loved to have gotten an update. I think they need to I would like them to at least acknowledge in some way. I don't care if it's a CGI trailer or something. Like, give us something. It would be nice.
Yeah.
I'm also okay with
taking the thing I heard they were saying that they just didn't know like what direction to go just because like the different world events that are going on right now. I think that was quite a long time ago now, but that was like the last official thing from Rockstar that I heard is that they're like, if we had a new GTA, like we don't know even what direction we would go in right now just because of current world events that are going on. So
there was a lot of stuff going on and like everything from like 2018 through 2020, there was a lot of stuff that they were just like, now's not a great time to release our type of satire and humor.
Right.
So like I could appreciate all of that.
And like you said, I'd rather have a game that they take their time on and make it perfect rather than just rush something out there like Call of Duty seems to be doing.
We're not going to get GTA 7 for another 10 years after that. So it's okay. It's going to be around.
GTA 6 will come out and then probably 15, 20 years and you'll get the next one.
One game that there's still like rumors and glimpses of hope it's going to make an appearance before the end of the month. I saw some rumors even this morning. And maybe even by the time this video is edited and uploaded out, that it may have been out. But God of War has been strangely absent. It's still slated for 2022. It is PlayStation's biggest title that is like anticipated, and it's just we already had a Sony State of Play, and it wasn't even there. So I'm nervous. I don't know if they're going to give us a surprise State of Play. That's the rumor that it's going to get its own, and we're still going to get news. I'm hopeful it's not going to drop in between this recording and me editing and uploading it. But I'm hopeful that we get news of it. But that's the big one that was missing for me is God of War is still supposed to drop this year. And we're recording this on June 28th. We're a couple days away from ending the most important time of the month of gaming news. So if you don't get it out in June, there's really not a big event. Granted, they can always do a State of Play. There's no rules, but there's kind of rules. Like a big holiday release like that needs to kind of get out, so they don't have much longer. I'm hopeful that they're just going to give us a surprise State of Play sometime this month still, but I don't know. That's a big one that's missing for me. On the small hope that it does drop news and we do still get it slated for this year. That's what I mean. It's like, it's not that I if they still plan to release it this year, I would have expected news, which makes me worried. But also, God of War was a game of the year game. It's phenomenal. I want them to take their time. There was some internal issues. There was an injury that caused the game's delay. So like the game comes out when it comes out. I want them to take their time because I want God of War's sequel to be another game of the year contender. So I don't mind them taking their time, but they're still planning to launch it this year. So it's just kind of weird. We have heard nothing about it and seen nothing about it. And June's almost over. So Sony kicked off their state of play at the beginning of the month, and it just wasn't there. So I think that was the biggest thing that was missing for me. So that's the big one for me. But yeah, thanks guys. I want to thank you so much for coming, talking about the gaming industry with me, doing this big State of Gaming Infinite Summer panel. This was a lot of fun.
For inviting me to this event. This was awesome.
Yeah, Jesse,
yeah, it was great to have you guys.
So
Don't thank me.
No, I'm really glad to have you. Great opinions, great insights. You guys let me rant a little bit more than I wanted. So I when I get passionate about a topic, sometimes it's just it's like I can talk honestly that I need to make a separate video just about what I was talking about with the game pricing and launch dates and all this stuff, because I've written so many articles about it. I just need to make a video now. But yeah, thank you for indulging me there. Before we go, I just want to give you guys a chance to plug. For those that don't know what Project Genesis is, haven't seen it, didn't see our interview or our trailers on the YouTube channel, give you a chance to give like a quick plug about it, let people know about it.
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Jesse. Appreciate it. It's a blast talking with you, and very nice to meet you, Blake. Appreciate it.
You as well.
So Project Genesis, it's a sci-fi PvP shooter. Basically, you can think of it like COD in space, and our particular hook is a game mechanic where you can fly in a battlecraft, breach these giant capital ships, go on board, get into FPS play. So it's hopefully a little bit of chocolate peanut butter with space combat and FPS play. So thanks much, Jesse. Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna plan to put some stuff in the background throughout this video. So we'll try to get some Project Genesis stuff behind us as well. And thank you for sharing. I know I'm really excited for it. Anyone who's seen our interview, it looks really cool. Blake, I don't think I've shared it with you yet.
I don't think I've seen it, but I really want to now.
It's really cool. I think we were talking. I think it was before we went live with this. We're just how much it reminds me of Battlefront 2, the classic, that the hybrid space first-person shooter approach, being able to land on capital ships. It's just really cool. Something I've just rarely ever see. It's not done commonly. That I'm really excited for. For those of you watching, I'll put the interview and the trailer down in the description below. Definitely check it out. It's worth supporting that game. It's available to wish list on Steam now. I'm really excited about it. Check it out. And I want to thank both you, Blake, and James for joining us on this Infinite panel. We're really excited to have you, and I'll see everybody here on the next Infinite summer content, as well as the next Game Infinite video.
Oh. Thank you, Jeff.
I love the chase and the hunt, and I set the pace when I'm running. I always take what I want, and I always give it 100. Don't need a bank, no, I'm funded. Play the game like it's nothing. I'm always thankful for something. Don't take for granted, stay humble. Now wake up! It's time to look at the enemy.